Bonsai! Hello, and welcome to day 9 of the Genesis of Androzani Event Calendar. We just recorded day 22, so we're a bit out of loop, aren't we? Patreon.com/Genesis of Androzani.
You just sound like the singer from Return of the Jedi, the CGI.
Go check out our review of Return of the Jedi if you want to hear Anthony's rant on that scene.
McClunky.
No! No, no, no. Never. Thankfully, my review of A New Hope was before that change.
McClunky is the greatest thing to ever happen to Star Wars.
McClunky.
I swear that's just George Lucas fucking with people. Anyway. And if it is, thank you, George. I respect that.
And my thanks goes to Harmy for the specialized edition, so I don't have to put myself through that pain and agony.
McClunky. Anyway.
And the fucking... Oh, yep, so he misses him from point blank range, and Han Solo goes...
Yeah.
Star Wars is stupid. But yeah, patreon.com/Genesis of Androzani. So I'll have the right prescription drugs to get through The Rise of Skywalker in theaters. Bubble wrap.
Oh no, it's the thing from
Ark in Space. And
I'm sure we've made that joke
Chibnall.
before, yeah.
Twitter.com/GAndrozani is a place full of dark...
Hatred and bile. And arguments.
Dark. The night is dark and full of terrors.
Yes.
Yes.
But you don't want to say that on Twitter because people will be like, Game of Thrones, what happened to you? Only in a much more aggressive voice.
We just kind of forgot about, you know, how to speak to each other with manners. We just sort of went, hey, no, in a certain limited amount of characters.
240, I think it is now.
Mm-hmm. But what we are actually doing for day 9 is
a ranking of the showrunners.
Yes, the showrunners / producers, because back in the classic era, that wasn't called a showrunner because the job was split between a producer and a script editor. Yeah. We're going to be doing the producers for the classic run, because the script editors were very in and out. Yeah. But the producers was quite more solid, grounding for most.
Closer to what we know as a showrunner
for the most part. But yes, we are going to be doing a ranking of all the showrunners. I think this video will illustrate our feelings on different portions of the show. And in terms of myself, like I do with a lot of rankings, I have a bunch of categories that I rank them by because I'm mathematical and anxious and indecisive, and I have to do this so I can make a list. Because lots of parts of the show are equal in my mind. But we have no ties on this channel, do we?
No.
Do we?
No, I haven't worn a tie yet.
It's exactly the reason Jake put the Doctor Dances Below Boomtown in Aliens of London, isn't it? Because there's no ties, because he puts them all on equal footing.
Yeah.
Because he loves it.
Equally. It's all level. The Slitheen and the gas mask children. Anyway.
Thank you for wearing your ID cards. It'll help to identify the bodies. So the categories that I've used to rank the showrunners are the characters, the stories, the impact, style, and legacy.
Yes.
So I suppose that is a maximum of what is it, 25 points? Because it's 5 points max.
5 times 5, 25.
25, yeah. So yeah, there are 12 showrunners. So I haven't included whoever was the producer for the TV.
I've missed one.
Oh, you missed one.
We'll get to it when we get to it, I'm sure. Once we get to the end, I'll figure out which one I've missed, and then plop them on that list.
It's going to be one of those ones where I'm going to have to animate a little switch.
Yay!
Like we did with top 10 stories last year, where you had to insert turn left and remove, is it Genesis of the Daleks?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had to just push it out. Oh. Okay, we'll figure it out.
Oh, very exciting.
We live in exciting times.
Yes. But yeah, anything you want to say before we start the list?
Let's go.
Alright then, paper, scissors, rock?
Sure.
Paper, scissors, rock. Paper, scissors, rock.
You can go first.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna go first with my number 12.
Yes.
This one does come with a slight asterisk, but based on what I've seen of this showrunner's work, I think it's deserved.
Yep.
Unfortunately, it's Chris Chibnall.
I'm going to say Snap, because whoever I've forgotten is going to be above this. Purely because A, he's not finished his run yet, and B, what we have seen doesn't really appeal to us. It's not Doctor Who that really engrosses us or makes us or moves us in an emotional way or makes us think this is exciting. It's just, for me, it's just quite vanilla.
I think his characters are bland. I think his stories are bland. I think his style is, I give him a 0. I think he is completely lacking in style, especially within his own stories.
Yeah.
He sucks the life out of everything, sucks the fun out of everything, and when he tries to add in quirky little bits, it's just forced, like, oh, I'm socially awkward, this is my fam. It's not Doctor Who. It's very, he's behind the mark when it comes to having a certain kind of, actually having, some personality.
I could see why it absolutely reached people, because it is a very functional series. It hits all the right beats.
Yep. And I think I can also see why not necessarily the tone or the stories themselves, because that's very incongruous, but in terms of just the core TARDIS team, I can definitely see why they appeal to children.
Absolutely.
Because they do. Especially Jodie's Doctor has become a big hit with children.
And even though, as I said, I find Ryan to be written younger than he actually is,
yes,
I think that would work fantastically for young children watching the show, especially when he's like learning to ride his bicycle, and young children with dyspraxia, because being a dyspraxic myself, we never saw ourselves on screen. It was never addressed, like dyslexia was, but a very specific subsection of dyslexia.
But if you remember that's only addressed in the first 2 episodes.
Exactly, and that's the another issue I have with Chibnall is, even though he brought things like Tim Shaw back, there wasn't enough carry through the whole season of Graham and Ryan's grieving.
Well, what about Yaz as being police woman? That's only in the first episode.
I hope in series 12 we get to see more of Yaz aspiring to be more of an authority figure, because that was an interesting character setup that was forgotten about because we had too much of a big TARDIS team and not enough time for any of them. And that was really my big issue with the whole series, is the characters never got proper times to shine. There were moments of quite cool ideas, and Graham was very charming, but it just didn't quite click with me, unfortunately. I do see why it was successful, and I'm glad it was successful, because the more Doctor Who, the better. And,
Yes. Now, one of the strangest scores that I've given for him between 2 different categories is really odd, because the 2 different categories, when people look at it on the surface, you may think they're quite similar, but I think this example, good thing we do it first, really illustrates why they're not sometimes. And that is, I gave him a 0 for legacy, but a 5 for impact.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because he cast a female as the Doctor.
Yes.
That is huge. That is one of the biggest things to ever happen to this show, but his legacy is a 0 because of how he's executed it on screen.
So far, yeah. That may yet change. There is still time. And the thing is, I do hold out hope, because I adore Broadchurch. The dialogue in Broadchurch is fiery and wonderful.
And he's done some pretty good Torchwood as well.
And he's done some very, very good Torchwood.
And there's little bits and pieces in some of his better episodes that show there is potential.
Yeah, it's just, for me, it felt like Series 11 was just playing it a bit too safe for my liking, which I completely understand why they would do that. Just didn't quite gel for me. But there is still time, and I'm looking forward to Series 12 despite my better judgment.
Yeah. So there's still time for him.
Yep.
But at this point, he is bottom.
Yes.
Unfortunately. And yeah, I think there's a reason why, because I have a Doctor Who DVD collection, and I'm a completionist. Like, I like things to be complete. There's a reason why I haven't bought any of the Jodie DVDs yet.
Yeah.
Because it's just hasn't. I'm not driven to do so. Firstly, because it's free to stream in New Zealand, but also I just don't have that same drive to collect it and add it to my collection because it doesn't feel like something I really need.
And the thing is about this, we'll get to Moffat later, but coming off of Moffat, who so strongly either amazed me or frustrated me, I was so invested in wanting quality from him. But with Chibnall, it's quality. It's just that it's so consistently middle of the road for me that I just don't, week to week, get excited for it. Whereas with Moffat, I was like, it could be a gold mine, it could be a mine collapse. I don't know. Yes.
So yeah. Does this mean that it's time for your number 11 or potentially number 10? I don't know. Who knows which one you've forgotten?
John Wiles.
Snap.
Hey.
2 in a row. Double snap.
You can take the floor.
Okay. This is a very odd one to talk about because he's the second and he only stuck around for 4 stories. So season 3 had 3 different showrunners, which explains why it's a bit of a mess.
Yeah.
Because he came in during the Mythmakers and he left in the Arc. And the highest points I've given him is a 5 for it. Now this is interesting because he, in terms of style, is the opposite of Chibnall. I've given him a 5 for style.
Yeah.
And it's because, as you all know, and I'm pretty sure you'll agree with me on this, Jon Wiles loves dark stories like the Daleks' Master Plan and the Massacre, and fucking hell, his Doctor Who is dark. It's punishing, it's gripping, it's captivating, and it's relentless.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is.
And I do love that. I do love that. But at the same time, as a showrunner, he was kind of a failure because why would you... I don't understand the thinking behind firing. Not only, you know, he fired Maureen O'Brien, who played Vicky, to be replaced by Katarina, to then replace her with Sarah Kingdom, and then to replace her with Anne Chaplet, then to replace her with Dodo Chaplet. Yeah. It's a mess. He's so indecisive and didn't really know what he was doing, and really, really made Bill Hartnell cross and made it set hell.
Yeah.
He just wasn't the right man for the role of producer. But the only, like, I think in terms of what he did behind the scenes, he was definitely the worst one out of all of them. Because he really badly damaged that season and the workforce behind it. But the reason why he's above Chibnall is I just love the darkness of those 2 stories.
Yeah, there's a certain style, as you mentioned, to his era that grips me more than Chibnall's era does, and that's the only reason. Because functionally, Chibnall is so much better in terms of how he structures, how he plans, how he executes everything.
It's professional.
It's so professional. Chibnall, there is no denying how professional Chibnall is. He's stellar at that. But I'm more drawn to those stories because
they're fucking wild.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, not much more I can say really because his run's so short. When it
felt like he just took Verity Lambert's show and got like a massive black permanent marker and said, "That's what we're doing."
Yep.
And William Hartnell's like, "I do not approve of this," and he's like, "I'm the fucking boss. Listen to me."
Yeah.
But then eventually he quit.
Yeah.
Short-lived and had its positives, but boy, it was a mess for him. So yeah, number 11 is Jon Wiles. I suppose I should go next for my number 10.
You go for gold.
Right, I'm very interested to see which one you forgot.
Same.
I thought that would be the one you forgot.
No.
So.
Unless I've just misnumbered them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Nope, I've definitely forgot one. Guess we'll find out.
Okay, I've got another theory on which one it might be, just based on how errors go.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to find out which one you forgot.
Yeah, because I looked at the producer's list and everything, and the list you sent me, and fun surprise. Okay, so your number.
Well, you know, it would be so funny. What if you forgot Russell T Davies? That'd be hilarious. That'd be hilarious. Oh, how can I forget him? Anyway, my number 10. Oh, I'm a little bit scared about this.
Mm.
Because number 10 is a very famous man, a very talented man, a brilliant sci-fi writer, but I just don't think he's the best showrunner. And that is obviously the insane but brilliant Stephen Moffat.
That's the one.
Who you haven't snapped for, have you?
Not yet.
Okay. I honestly don't even know if we need to say anything, because we've covered so much Moffat on this channel, and I'm sure you all know how we feel about him. Moffat is amazing when it comes to coming out with ideas for sci-fi, for creating environments that are abstract, for challenging characters, for thinking of thought-provoking concepts, for
singular focused episodes.
And at times when he's really focused is very, very, very witty. But his time as showrunner is an absolute mess. It's an absolute mess. The story arcs are all over the place. The characters are flirtatious, sexual, unnecessarily inconsistent. They are non-focused. They are cheesy, Americanized, over the top. With Matt Smith's era, it's like watching Buck Rogers' American blockbuster explosion. This is a big trap hole of mirror maze and a lot of adjectives and then with Capaldi's era, it's like he's like, oh, very deep thinking and lots of speeches and lectures and oh, what is this? What part of my life is important when it comes to this particular section of this episode? You know, what lessons can be learned from this? But really, it's just a bit of nonsense, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just a bit silly. Except for Heaven Sent. It's weird because sometimes he really hits the nail on the head, but it almost feels like it's accidental.
Yeah.
But there is stuff to praise as Moffat. I think he always had the ambition to be like, I want every single one of my episodes to be the best episode you've ever seen, and obviously sometimes it didn't quite do that because of reasons, but he is extremely ambitious, he is confident, he is balls to the walls, but I think as showrunner, when it comes to the vast majority of his era, I would say particularly Series 6, 7, 8, 9, he just doesn't do it for me. He's too wild, he's too unpredictable and not focused enough, and there's just a lot of problems.
Yep.
Yeah.
I concur, and I'll get to him later.
Yes. Who's your number 10?
This is might be a bit surprising. I have endless respect for this man, but for very similar reasons.
I know, I've got a strong feeling I know who this is.
Very, very similar reasons. My number 10 is John Nathan Turner. A wonderfully flamboyant and crazy man.
Longest tenure, actually.
He did have the longest tenure.
The entire 80s.
And it shows.
Yes.
Because it's clear that he loved the show and he was fighting for it, and he was often on the back foot against the BBC, and Colin Baker was his idea. Like, once he met Colin Baker, he's like, that's the guy.
Very similar to how Capaldi was Moffat's thing.
Yeah.
He's like, the BBC is like, no, we want another marketable, like, Matt Smith, David Tennant type Doctor. And then Moffat's like, no, we have to have Capaldi.
And
he's a brilliant actor. We have to have Capaldi. I'm going to stay on for another 3 years of miserable life just so we can have him.
And that's the thing. And John Nathan Turner loved the show so much that he knew if he left the show, it may very well just die and be cancelled. And he stuck it out. And for that, I have endless respect for him. Yeah. The issue is, because his tenure was so long, and so many things happened both behind the scenes and on screen, it's just so all over the place that I can't say it's brilliant or shite, because it's both. It's so 50-50, and as I said, I have endless respect for him, and so many of my childhood favorite classic stories are due to his producing.
But so many of your least favorites as well.
Yeah, it's a mess. And
when you think about the fact that within season 21, you get Resurrection of the Daleks and the Caves of Androzani, but you also get Warriors of the Deep and the Twin Dilemma.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes it's yeah. But for all accounts, from everyone who I've heard interviewed about him, he was an extraordinarily lovely man to work with, and all the doctors who worked with him seemed to love him, even Colin Baker, because John Nathan Turner was the one who called him and let him know that he was fired. And I think Colin Baker really appreciated and respected that John Nathan Turner did that, as opposed to sending him a letter in the post or getting someone else to do it, or a production runner or something. John Nathan Turner loved the show, and that love was clear, but it was a mess.
He stuck with the show until he was forced out of it.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm not leaving this ship until it sinks.
Yeah, I'm not leaving the ship until there is someone who can take it over for me. Until there is a good captain.
Yeah.
Which the BBC was not willing to give.
And that's why my number 9 is John Nathan Turner.
There we are.
And the in terms of like the categories, almost all of them are 3 because of it's so mixed. I'm like, what do I do with this? Like, it's everywhere. But the one thing I have given him a 5 for is impact.
Yes.
Because I think he's made a very strong impact on the show. I think the 80s era is very distinct, and I think his personality shines through it. He is the one big booming piece of energy that really pulsates through it all.
Yeah.
I think he's like one of the only aspects of the Davison era that keeps it alive. Is his style of like, well, you know, because obviously a lot of it's very bland, but because he's like, I need to inject all these big bright colors into it so that it's interesting. I think it's just to have him there at the very least does make some style at least. But in terms of overall, he did have a big responsibility and a lot to live up to, because he did technically have Tom Baker's final season, but ultimately he had the responsibility of following the peak of Classic Who. Yeah. In terms of its general audience popularity, and he really struggled.
There is a huge parallel between him and Stephen Moffat.
Yes.
There's a lot of similarities.
Yeah. Yeah. And the only reason why I put him slightly above Moffat, like very small amount, is because I think Moffat's personally hurt me more in terms of my passion for this show. Whereas with John Nathan Turner, there's certainly some disastrous moments, but despite the fact that they are quite terrible at times, like I've said how much I really think Warriors of the Deep is a massive failure, it doesn't hurt the sort of my own passion of the show the same way that some of Moffat's downfalls did, and that's really the only difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now, on the flip side of that,
your number 9,
the one and only, the legendary, the infamous Stephen Moffat. Now, the reason I put him just above John Nathan Turner is his singular episodes that he penned himself that I love. Blink, not Parting of the Ways, Empty Child and the Doctor Dances. All of the ones he wrote during the Davies era.
Yes.
All of them.
Girl in the Fireplace, Silence in the Library, even Time Crash.
Girl in the Fireplace, which has several times been mentioned as by my father as his favourite episode, and he's seen like almost all of the show.
Stopped after Saranga Conundrum.
And he is a genius. He is a genius, but for all the same reasons you mentioned, it's a messy era and it's not quite for me. But I have so much endless respect and reverence for him. If I'm ever half the writer that he is, I will be content with my career, because he truly is a genius, and I have so much respect for him, despite all the shit we give him on this channel.
Oh yeah, and he seems like he'd be a great guy to hang out with. Just don't talk about Hellbent.
Absolutely.
Just talk about anything else.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
but he is bombastic and brilliant and wild and creative.
Yeah, and we love him. He's just mad.
Yeah. He just needed another showrunner to work with him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had a feeling that Moffat and J&T would end up pretty much on par.
They're very, very similar in a lot of respects.
Yeah. Now, this is the part in the list where it gets a bit grey, because a lot of the ones in the middle sort of blend together in my mind.
Yeah.
Because this is sort of where we get to the point where I'm like, I actually quite like a lot of this Doctor Who. And so for my number 8, I have gone with Graham Williams. Who was the producer from season 15 to 17. And yeah, he's very, very solid scores are given him. Like 3 for characters, 3 stories, impact 4, style 4, legacy 4. Graham Williams is like a, you know, he's a pioneer of comedic Doctor Who, like Tom Baker era. There's a reason why in the latter half he brought on Douglas Adams to become the script editor. Because obviously Robert Holmes fucked off and they used, I think it was, what's his name? It's hurting my mind.
No, it wasn't Terrence.
Nope. His name is. They were under a pseudonym when they did Invasion of Time. Oh no. It is. I'm gonna get to it very soon. It's hurting my brain. Anthony Reid. Anthony Reid is the script editor that was for the first half of Williams' era. Yeah. Second half of 15 and then 16, I think he did, and then 17 was Douglas Adams. So Williams, very, very comedic. The Tom Baker section that you can really just sort of sit down and watch and enjoy. Like, you know, if you want to see an example, watch our reaction to The Creature from the Pit. But on top of that, you think of stories like City of Death, and the Ribos Operation, the Pirate Planet, Horror of Fang Rock, Image of the Fendal, Sunmakers. There's a lot of fun. Yeah. But I think there's something to be said about the fact that Williams era Doctor Who is more so pulp than substance. It's very much just popcorn Doctor Who, you know? And that's great. And I do really enjoy it, and I'll watch it and be entertained. That's the key word, entertained by it anytime. And there's some genuinely brilliant stories in there. But it's sort of just that. Yeah. It's just entertainment, really. It's a bit of neat sci-fi with a couple of disasters, because there is a couple in there. Yeah. But mostly it's pretty neat, entertaining sci-fi. Really, really good. Some really good stories in there, but the overall sort of vibe is just this popular TV show is peaking because it's Tom Baker's era, and we are going to make it as funny as possible. And by the end, it got it just almost out of hand. Yeah. How ridiculously hilarious it became, but and possibly a bit too far. But yeah, I don't know. Williams era I do enjoy, but I don't think it's doesn't have the meat to it. Yeah. So.
No worries.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Mild criticism, I'd say. That's why he's my number 9. What's your number 9?
Let me just double check. Innes Lloyd.
Innes Lloyd.
Yes. So, some very solid stories under his reign. Without question. And some of the most atmospheric under his reign as well.
Just for context, if anyone doesn't know, Innes Lloyd took over after John Wiles, so halfway through season 3, and stayed all the way into halfway through season 5. So he was for the end of Hartnell and the start of Troughton, basically.
So sort of the beginning of Troughton, and through that, some very, very, very good stories came.
And I would say, I obviously haven't mentioned him yet, but I think his biggest accomplishment is that he was there for the regeneration, the first regeneration. Yeah. Being the producer that managed that. It's quite a big thing to get through. Anyway.
Absolutely. And yes, absolutely. He's, in terms of like significance and, you know, legacy, key to the show still being around. The fact that he helped with the regeneration and everything like that. It's just that his stories, in terms of how much I go back and rewatch them. It's not that I don't like them. I think a lot of them are very, very, very strong. It's just that they're not they just don't grip me as much as some of the others. Really, it's quite simple as that. There's no overwhelmingly negative things I have to say towards his era per se. It's just a very transitional period, a strong transitional period, and there's some really, really good stuff in there. But I just prefer stuff that came later and before.
Oh, well, there you go then.
Yeah.
And that means it's time for my number 7.
Correct.
Peter Bryant.
Snap.
Right, was this the one that was missing from your list?
Nope, he was there.
Okay.
He's listed as 6 currently, but will be 7.
Have you remembered who the...
No, I haven't figured it out. I've been Googling and I just cannot find who it is.
Hang on a second. Okay, there's a few options of who it could be. If it's the one that I think you've forgotten, then that's interesting. But if it's not, then that's even more interesting. If you've forgotten one of the major ones, I'd be very surprised.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
We'll see.
Alright then. Peter Bryant. So, he produced Tomb of the Cybermen. And then he did everything from the Web Affair to the Space Pirates.
Yeah.
So, late Troughton.
Yeah.
So why have I put Peter Bryant here? So I think that Peter Bryant is very solid. Character's 5. That's the highest sort of category I've given him. Because he cast Wendy Padbury as Zoe.
Yes.
And brought together the team of Troughton, Zoe and Jamie.
The best team.
Brilliant. And there's a lot of great stories in there. There's a couple that don't quite hit, like the Dominators, for example. And yeah, I think he's really, really good. But the lowest one I've given him is Impact, which is 3. I think out of all the producers, he's possibly had the least impact on the show, because I feel like he kind of carried over from Innes Lloyd. He got given the job. It feels like he kind of just he kept the ball rolling. In a lot of ways. That's what I feel like. He didn't really do that much in the role in terms of changing the show, revolutionizing anything, making big decisions. Most of his stuff was just keep this Troughton era going the way it's going until it runs out.
Yeah.
But under his reign, we got things like Tomb of the Cybermen, like
Brilliant.
Fear in the Deep, Mind Dropper, Invasion, Scenes of Death. There's some great stuff there. But yeah, like I said, good producer, really, really good. But I don't know, just very hard to think of anything distinct about him that he did to the show. Aside from Zoe, that's the only real big thing.
He just caught the rugby ball and continued down to the try line.
Yeah.
You know, it's nothing wrong with that. It's just a very solid run.
Yeah. So I don't think he made that much impact on the show, but I did really enjoy a lot of the stuff that he was involved in.
Absolutely, agreed, fully agreed.
So you snapped. So does that mean it's your number 6?
Yes. So, my number 6. I see what's happened here. I've got 2 5s, so I do have them all.
Okay, so you're gonna have to separate them.
Yeah. No. So this is my number 6. So my next one's because I've got this one listed as number 5, and then above it number 5. So this is 6.
Yeah.
The one and only, the ever pivotal, never to be forgotten, Verity Lambert.
Ah, it's the original.
And she... Okay, firstly, a female head showrunner of a BBC drama. Granted, it was just kind of dismissed and thrown onto her, because they're like, oh yes, just take this silly little pulp thing that we're making for, 2 pence and a bottle of string or whatever. But
and that's accidentally give them a great cast and great ideas.
Yeah, and she...
That's Doctor Who for you.
Yeah, and she just took everything that she had on her back foot with the hardest challenge of any other showrunner, I think. She was a young woman when she took the role as well. She was early 20s, I think. And she took the role of the producer and was like, okay, let's see what I can do with this scrap, and turned it into a cultural phenomenon. Genius. There's no words to fully encapsulate what an impact, what a remarkable woman, what a talent she was as a creative and as a producer. The reason she's number 6, is because the stories under her reign, I love them dearly, a lot of them. But again, they just don't jump out at me as much as some things that came later. Tremendous cast and tremendous atmosphere, and we wouldn't be here today if it weren't for her and her tenacity and her just sheer willpower to get this thing made and make something of it. And make something of it, she absolutely did.
Go watch Adventure in Space and Time.
And cry your eyes out for 1,000 years.
One day.
She'll come back.
Okay, so now my number 6.
Yes.
My number 6 is the extremely consistent and extremely liberal
Yes.
Barry Letts,
Nah.
who was the producer for the vast majority of the Jon Pertwee era.
Correct.
And carried over to Tom Baker's first story. What are his strong points? Characters. Characters! There is not one Jon Pertwee companion that I don't like. They are all brilliant. Impact 5. He managed to balance, because obviously, you know, I'll get on to another producer after and explain the other side of that, but he managed to somehow balance transitioning this gritty, almost adult-themed story into a family-friendly show, yet still make it interesting. It's quite genius of him, really. Making something so evidently, what's the word, modern at the time?
Modern,
or,
mature...
contemporary!
Contemporary
Stories. He managed to wrap it around this sort of comic book flairiness and make it very family friendly, with some very enjoyable characters. And what else did he do? He cast Roger Delgado as the Master.
Yep.
And his legacy is fantastic. And a lot of his stories are fantastic. But, despite all that, in terms of like order, like a ranking order of my preference of style, because that's the one sort of bit that's a little bit down, I think his production style isn't exactly what I prefer in the show compared to others.
Yeah.
Particularly when it comes to some choices in terms of how he made the show. There's a lot of green screen in the early 70s. There's very... And I know that, you know, we always like, oh yeah, low budget, cheap sets, whatever, that's fine. But comparatively to eras that came beforehand, it doesn't quite work on a visual level, a lot of it. And I don't know, there's parts of that era, whilst I do love a lot of the stories, I just wish that some of the choices of not only tone and like maybe target audience, and also just the visual style of the show was targeted a bit more towards what I would like.
Yep. Makes sense.
But having said that, he showran a very successful and fantastic era. So
that he did.
Number 6, Barry Letts. And I love hearing him in the interviews. I know he's passed away now,
yes.
but all the DVD extras where he appears, he seems like a very nice man.
Interesting, very interesting.
Yes. What, is it your number 6
5,
or 5?
5.
Okay.
My number 5 is Graham Williams.
Ah, there he is.
Yes.
Is that the one you forgot?
No, I didn't forget any. I had them all listed. I just doubled up the numbers by mistake. So it only went to 12 when actually it went to... It only went to 11 when it actually did go to 12.
Right.
So, Graham Williams, so consistent, and I really enjoy a lot of the stuff he did.
Except for Invasion of Time.
Except for Invasion of Time. Oh, boy, that was bad. But the thing is, like, it just feels like a lesser version of the last few years, what came before it.
Well, like I said, it's a much more comedic version rather than focused on the stories themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not quite as a... It's yeah. Well, I'll get to it when I get to what came before. It's good, very entertaining. easily something I'd be like, hey, if you want to go watch some random classic Doctor Who.
You've gone on about before about how she loved the Pirate Planet.
Yeah.
And City of Death.
Yes. So I just sort of say, if you want accessible, fun, classic Doctor Who, for the most part, there's a few duds in there, but generally speaking, I would say watch any of these stories from his era, and it'll be so easy to sit down, watch a couple episodes, come back later and finish it off.
Though, depending on which way it goes, we may sound like complete hypocrites, because earlier in this calendar we will have watched Power of Kroll.
Yes. So we shall see.
We shall see whether we're right or wrong.
But for the most part, it's because it's quite fluffy. It's generally speaking quite accessible, and
yeah, I mean, at the time of this recording, the most recent Doctor Who story I watched was the Ribos Operation, which was under Graham Williams, and I loved it. It was very entertaining, and there's a lot of very enjoyable performances in a lot of the stories. Yeah. It's just hamped up by the fact that Graham Williams loved the comedic style of the era. It's just the way he said, Tom, do your thing and make sure all the guest characters feel like they're in the same room as you know? Yeah. It's like, you know, when you first see the Tom Baker Doctor in the early seasons, you're like, wow, I really find this kind of character enjoyable to watch. It's like, okay, well, what would happen if we made every character like that? And it was like just this massive level of Tom Baker humor everywhere in the story. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I've got not much more to say. Very accessible, very fun.
Go watch our reaction to Creature from the Pit.
Yes.
And Nightmare of Eden.
Absolutely.
Yes. So is it time for my number 5?
Yes.
My number 5 is Innes Lloyd.
Aha.
I think I mentioned before, one of the main reasons is that he was the producer that took us through the first generation.
Yes.
Which I think is a very significant moment in the show that they had to get right.
Absolutely.
And I think they absolutely nailed it. Innes Lloyd cast Ben and Polly, he cast Patrick Troughton, he cast Jamie and Victoria. It's
pivotal.
And some of the stories under his era, I love the War Machines, the Gunfighters, the 10th Planet, the Power of the Daleks, the Moonbase, the Macroterror, the Faceless Ones, the Evil of the Daleks, the Ice Warriors, and the Enemy of the World, which was his final producing role, was Enemy of the World. Yeah. And fantastic, just amazing impact on the show, and the style of the era. He really picked it up after John Wales, you know, sort of messed around a bit. He really sort of it took him a little bit to get there because of the scripts of season 3 and where they were headed, but over time he managed to pick it up and really sort of rebuild the broken picture, and managed to and did the difficult task of taking Hartnell to the end. Yeah. Because Hartnell by that point had been so worn out by the show that it was becoming very difficult, and Innes Lloyd had a very big responsibility of getting it right. And so basically what I'm saying is when he started at the Celestial Toymaker, the show was in tatters. Yeah. But by the time we get to Enemy of the World, it was on fire again. Yeah. So his transitional period was fantastic. And he
kind of made a phoenix out of it and burnt it down and brought it up.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think Innes Lloyd is a very important part of the show, and I think he's very significant and really made a big impact, which is why he's my number 5. But the ones I've ranked above him, I just think that probably just more subjectively their styles are a bit more on fire for me than his, though I do enjoy a lot of the stories. So, your number 4?
My number 4 is Philip Hinchcliffe.
Ah,
yes.
Philip Hinchcliffe.
So, I mean...
Actually, no, that makes sense. Thinking about it.
So, the Ark in Space... to the Talons of Wen Chiang. And all that in between.
There's a lot of gothic horror. There's a lot of iconic stories. There's a lot of great performances. It's brilliant.
It's fucking superb. And it's just so key in giving Tom Baker some actual dramatic stuff to sink his teeth into, whilst also having that fine balance of his fun attitude, which sort of overtook the show later on. Not necessarily a bad thing, but just a shift in a different direction, and I just prefer when there was a bit more of a balance for his character. Really interesting parts of the lore explored, really daring stories chosen to be made, and sort of pushing the boundaries a little bit, pushing the button, and just constantly, you know, nudging the show in directions that hadn't gone before, and I really, really, really like it. That's... Yeah.
Yep. I'll get to him later.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. So what's your number 4?
My number 4 is Derek Sherwin. I was talking before about Barry Letts and the style he transitioned away from.
Yep.
Derek Sherwin had a very small time on this show. 2 stories, an influence on the next 3 that he wasn't working on, but the style was set. And also Mind of Evil, I think you could argue as well. But within his 2 stories, characters 5, stories 5, impact 5, style 5, and I did Legacy 2 because it just doesn't have enough time.
He's like the Robert Sherman of the classic series.
Oh boy, he is. His debut was the War Games,
and his finale
was season 7. Flawless record, perfect.
Yep.
But wasn't on the show long enough. It's like, not just Rob Sherman, he's also kind of like the Christopher Eccleston of showrunners. And
the crazy thing is, War Games and Spearhead from Space are vastly different in tone, and yet they're both superb.
Yes. Derek Sherwin brought a realism to the show, grittiness, adultness, yet it's still Doctor Who, it's still sci-fi, still has the charming characters, but he made the show feel more real than it ever had, and probably ever has, and it's fucking great. And the Spearhead from Space Blu-ray has enlightened me to, in contrast to Barry Letts, because I was talking before about Barry Letts' visual style, the Spearhead from Space Blu-ray has enlightened me to how brilliant of a producer he is in terms of visual style.
Yeah.
Because it looks like a James Bond film from that time. It's beautiful.
It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous.
Yes. And also I think there is something distinct about the War Games that ups the ante from the rest of the Troughton era. Because I love the Troughton era, but when you get to the War Games, there's something about it that feels different to the rest.
There's this shifting in tide that you can just feel.
And I've said before, when it comes to tone, one of the big reasons why War Games is my favourite story is because it balances the mystery, fantasy, sci-fi adventure of the Second Doctor's era and the 60s as a whole, but blends it with that grittiness that we got in Season 7.
Yeah.
It's the perfect balance, and Derek Sherwin's fantastic, but he was only around for a very small time.
Yeah.
Is it your number 3?
My number 3, this may surprise you, is Barry Letts. It's no secret, the Jon Pertwee era is my favourite. The only reason he's number 3 is there are some duds in there. They're not duds, I enjoy every single Jon Pertwee story, but there is some sameness in a couple of the stories where if you're like watching them one after the other, it can get a bit mind-numbing.
Yeah, I feel like the more sort of mid-tier stories tend to all blend into one. Like I think a good one to look at would be something like Planet of the Daleks, where it's like, because everything else in Season 10 I think is fucking amazing. But then you look at Planet of the Daleks and you're like, this is just them running around Daleks and stuff. And then you look at something like, you know, Planet of the Spiders has a lot of that too. As does I'd say a lot of Season 9 has that. I think Season 9's a very specific one that has a lot of that Barry Letts style to it, like Time Monster. And then with Season 8, like you said, sameness. Love the Master, but they do sort of repeat a lot of elements, and there's a lot of like, okay, we're gonna, you know, check a bunch of boxes. It's got to have, you know, a very specific political viewpoint. It's got to have, and executed well, I will say, but it feels like it's like Barry Letts has the same thing in all the stories, isn't he?
And the thing is about that is I love the angles he takes with the show and the fact that it's more grounded. The Doctor's a bit like he's a different kind of course to William Hartnell, but you know he's got this sort of suaveness as well as the sophistication and arrogance, which I really quite like. He's so different to every other Doctor, and I love that it's grounded. It feels like a spy thriller at times, and then when it goes sci-fi, it goes really fun with it, and
Oh, I forgot to mention one thing.
Yeah.
About Barry Letts. He cast not only I did say Roger Delgado, but I forgot to mention he not only cast him and Richard Franklin, but he also cast Katie Manning, Elizabeth Sladen, and Tom Baker.
What more needs to be said about his legacy? Yes, so I do understand the criticisms with him, but because I love his style so much, granted a lot of special effects are dated, but because I love the sort of grounded, more gritty nature of it, I can see past that because I'm like, I like this. I like this sort of scrappy feeling to it, this kind of, you know, anti-bureaucracy kind of...
Well, Claws of Axos, like, there's literally a line where the Doctor says, England for the English, are you mad?
Yeah, it's...
Pretty sure, isn't the mutants like a direct commentary on Nazis as well?
Oh god, yeah. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of that through Barry Letts' stuff. Anyway, if you want to know more of my thoughts, go and watch our Doctor's Ranking, in which, when I get to Jon Pertwee, I talk in depth about this. Okay. Go.
Is it my number 3? I think it is. It is my number 3.
Yeah.
Verity Lambert.
Aha.
Yes, Verity Lambert. Which we've sort of gone through already, but I love Verity Lambert. I think that she is very close to perfect for me. I love the stories. I think The Hartnell Era is one of my favourites. Not only a balance of some very interesting historicals with a great sense of adventure. The show, weirdly, despite the fact that it was on scraps of budget, has never really had a bigger scale than it had when she was around. Her impact, her style, and her legacy is all things that I appreciate. It's childlike, yet it has an adultness to it. There is a great moral compass. It's quite simple, yet it's effective. There's a cuteness and an endearment to some of the creative ways they made these villains and creatures that are, like, you know, you think of the Zabi and the, just, you know, an episode like Planet of Giants.
Daleks.
Well, there you go. But... yeah, the only real, I suppose, downside is that the two above her really push the boat out quite hard, and obviously one of them is a nostalgic factor, but I do love Verity Lambert. I think she was a brilliant start to the show, and yeah, I love the Hartnell Era, and she's one of the main reasons why. She's just a pioneer and a fantastic showrunner. Yep. Number 3.
Okay. My number 2 is Derek Sherwin. Okay. Why I put him over Barry Letts?
He's like Barry Letts' big brother, isn't he?
And consistency.
Yes.
2 stories, in and out, real quick. His influence on the show is my favourite era, and he oversaw the War Games. War Games, Spearhead from Space are both 10 out of 10 for me. Incredibly different, but both just top tier, god tier shit.
Because of him, we got the Silurians and Inferno.
Yes, and it's all just brilliant stuff. Everything he did for the show, I absolutely adore, and that is why he is my number 2.
Yes. Because you just did your Derek Sherwin number 2, didn't
you? Sherwin number 2.
Derek Sherwin. Okay. My top 2, both of them, is that the right terms?
All both of them.
Both of my top 2, and if you do the maths, I'm sure you can figure out who they are.
Yep.
They both have full marks.
Ooh.
They both are 35 out of 35. So, separating them is impossible. Except it's not impossible, because I can separate them.
And I think I know which factor is going to bump one over the other.
I'm sure you do. Number 2, Philip Hinchcliffe.
Ta-da!
Very predictable choice. You know, this is the most famous era of Classic Who. But fuck, it's good. It's good. Tom Baker, Sarah Jane, Harry Sullivan, Leela. It's great. Ark in Space, Genesis of the Daleks, Terror of the Zygons, Pyramids of Mars, Brain of Morbius, Seeds of Doom. Sarah Jane's exit scene itself, even. Deadly Assassin, Robots of Death, Talons of Wang Chiang. It's my watch through of that era, at least most of it. Some of it I'd already seen before. But my watch through that era came with a very specific friend of mine who's a big fan of not only gothic horror but satanic horror, and he loves Tom Baker, as do I, and just that binge we had was amazing. We were when it came to the comedic moments, we were rolling on the floor laughing, crying. When it came to the gothic horror, it was fantastic. It was spectacular. Contrast to Barry Letts, I fucking love the visual style of Hinchcliffe's era. When you get an episode like Planet of Evil, which isn't a particularly major story, it's quite filler, but when you look at the visual style of the jungle, it's brilliant. Hinchcliffe era has there's a lot of alien environments, there's a lot of great villains. It's got a great vibe to it. It's consistent, it's powerful, and it's fantastic, and I love his style. I love how he really pushed the boat out and tried to do as much as he can. I love the fact that he went down fighting and he got kicked off for the Deadly Assassin because he made it too much, and I love that. He says, no, I'm going to do whatever I want.
I'm going to go out making what I want.
Mary Whitehouse and what she thinks the kids want. I know what they really want. I know that...
Boo, Mary Whitehouse.
Yep, I know that when they grow up, they're going to really do dark things. I don't know. But, yeah, Philip Hinchcliffe is the balance of comedy and style and all the things that make Classic Who great, which is why he's my number 2.
Yeah.
And what's your number 1?
Do I even have to say it?
What's our number 1?
It's the one, the only, the bombastic, the spectacular, the emotional, the just never beaten, unthinkably clever, delightful, every positive adjective I could think of and beyond, the amazing Russell T Davies.
Snap.
Take it away.
Oh, you're gonna put the pressure on me.
Go for it.
Oh, God. Okay. Russell T Davies era Doctor Who, best TV ever made. What's your next thing?
Nostalgia is one hell of a powerful drug, but every time I go back to it, Series 2, little wonky. Series 1, 3, and 4, and the specials. I don't think it's a surprise. You know, we're children of the Davies era, but even so, even beyond that thing known as nostalgia, he is just a brilliant writer. And if you need further proof of that, go and watch any of his other shows he's written. You've seen the new one,
Years and Years.
Years and Years.
Oh.
Basically, if Turn Left was extended, Turn Left, Midnight. The episodes is written singularly. And the fact is,
Rose, Aliens of London, Dalek, Father's Day, Empty Child, Doctor Dances, Boomtown, Bad Wolf, Pining the Waves, Christmas Invasion, School Reunion, Girl in the Fireplace, Sidemen two-parter, Satan Pit two-parter, Doomsday two-parter, Smith and Jones, Gridlock.
Smith and Jones, Gridlock, Shakespeare Code, even though he didn't write that, but he was the showrunner for all of Series 3.
Human Nature, Family of Blood, Blink, Utopia, Sound of Drums, Last of the Time Lords, Partners in Crime, Fires of Pompeii. He brought back the Sontarans and the Sidemen and the Master and the Daleks.
And they all worked.
And he created the Ood, and he was there when Moffat created the Weeping Angels, and there was things like the Sycorax and the Jadoon, and just iconic things. I continue, Silence in the Library, Frost of the Dead, Unicorn and the Wasp, Midnight, Turn Left, Sonal of Journey's End, Waters of Mars. And even the End of Time.
The End of Time. He's mad, like Russell, like Moffat. He's mad, but oh my God, when he's good, when the difference between him and Moffat is, I love Moffat's singular episodes, and that's not to say I don't love Russell's singular episodes, because when they're good, I mean, it's no secret.
Midnight.
My favorite episode of the new series is Midnight, and that was written solely by him, and it was on the back of a pad in a supermarket.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that, we've covered that, and we will cover it again later on. It just amazes me and astonishes me how exciting, how gripping, how emotional, how real, and how human, and how fun he made it all. And the creativity, the risks he took, creating a meta explanation for the Wilderness era by making the Time War, and deciding to have this gap where he could explore, where it's the Doctor has fundamentally changed, and yet there are certain things that are key to him that motivates him going forward. And still to this day with Jodie Whittaker, you can feel little parts of that, because clearly Chibnall respects that era of Doctor Who, not only because he wrote in it, but because it is so brilliant. And I get why people are like, oh, it's so different from Classic Who, and I understand that criticism, and there are weak points, there absolutely are. Just watch any of the Series 2 videos I've been on. I'm not a huge fan of Series 2, but Series 1, Series 3, Series 4, and the specials are just genius, and the good stuff in Series 2 is fucking phenomenal. He made it so approachable, and it was so successful. I went to England across Christmas, New Year's time in 2008, and Doctor Who toys were everywhere. Doctor Who t-shirts were everywhere. It was just a fever pitch. You could feel it in the air. It was just this thing. People were excited for the Christmas special. Oh my god, the Christmas special. You can't wait for the Christmas special. Because Russell had captured the imagination of not just England. I'm not going to speak for all of England, but a large majority of it. And captured the imagination of Australia, New Zealand, the whole Commonwealth. He had gripped with this one revival of this mad TV series started in the 1960s that he just grew up loving, and decided to bring that passion forward and make a new revamped version of it with some elements from modern television to bring it into the 21st century, and he did so flawlessly.
Camille Coduri, Noel Clarke, Billy Piper,
Freema
Agerman, Catherine Tate,
John
Barrowman, John Sim, Derek Jacobi, Bernard Cribbins, Timothy Dalton, Christopher Eccleston,
David Tennant, David fucking Morrissey. I say that, you laugh. I'm being deadly serious. The Jackson Lake Doctor legitimately is one of my favourite things to come out of Russell's era. So good.
Yep. Hammy villains, but they're all great.
But sometimes they're really clever villains or genuinely terrifying villains. Midnight, a psychologically fucked character, a monster rather, because it gets so under the Doctor's skin, makes him so vulnerable, puts him completely on the back foot, which you don't usually see in Doctor Who. And you can tell it sort of affects him, and then immediately we go into into Turn Left, which is Dr. Less, and then obviously the cliffhanger from that, which just as a child was amazing. And
yes, and one thing that he does much better, in my opinion, than both Moffat and Chibnall, is he allows the guest writers to give their own style to the show.
Had we not had Russell trust Moffat, Moffat wouldn't have become the showrunner. Moffat wouldn't have been able to express... Because Moffat, obviously I don't know the specifics, I wasn't there. But it seems to me like Russell knew how clever Moffat was and said, look, 2 episodes series 1, there's a slot here, write whatever you want, go for gold. Here's the version of the Doctor we have.
Apparently Russell had a massive cry fest after he read the script for Empty Child Doctor Dances. Like he was like, this is some of the best writing I've ever seen in my life. And Moffat's like, but it was late. He's like, no, I don't care.
Yeah.
This is going to screen.
And then the next season he's like, okay, you just get the 1 episode, but do what you want. And he did go in the fucking fireplace.
Yeah, he's like, I want to see a romantic historical with Madame de Pompadour and the 10th Doctor. He's like, okay, I'm going to turn into a timey-wimey story as well.
And then, need we say more than Blink? Yes, Silence in the Library and the Forest of the Dead.
Oh yeah, the fact that Russell's like, I'm leaving. Can you I'll allow you to do a teaser trailer to your era.
Plant seeds.
Within my own show.
Plant seeds for what you want.
Because I love your ideas, so do them.
Yeah.
And to what I was saying before, some people might think, well, that's a bit of tonal inconsistency, but that's what this show is meant to be. It's meant to be a bunch of flavours, and that's what I was saying before about why I'm a man of variety. I love variety in this show. And Russell is the definition of that.
Yes.
He's the definition of that. Every writer gets their own style. But then again, through all of that, Russell seeks through, for the most part, all the characters that go within these stories.
There is a humanity, first and foremost, to his writing. There's an empathy. There's just this human, quintessential element to his era that shines above all other eras. Because they don't... Obviously, there is a human-doctor hybrid at one point. But the Doctor himself becomes a much more endearing character because he's been, with Eccleston, stripped back and traumatized. Tennant, you know our feelings. And it's just, his ideas were so daring and so scary, and the fact that he just got this show and was like, I'm just going to do this. This is what I'm going to do. This is my mission statement. And it worked. It wasn't an embarrassing failure. It wasn't a reboot. It wasn't these ones where it was like, oh God, remember when they rebooted Doctor Who for the second time and it didn't work.
And it got 13 million viewers on Christmas Day.
Yeah. And he hired Murray Gold. And he hired Nicholas Briggs.
And he's the reason Big Finish is still alive.
Yes! Because he swept it under the rug and hid it from the BBC.
Oh, and there's something we also haven't mentioned. Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures.
He's like, here, let me make one for really, really young kids whilst also giving fans more of this beloved character. And also, let's spin off this character and let's go adult with it. Let's see the edgier side of the show, which doesn't always work.
But when he's involved, it does. In, like you said, Children of Earth.
But when he gets to Children of Earth...
This is my favourite Doctor Who-related Russell-written content. Children of Earth. It's so good.
I just heard all of that.
Yeah. Spoilers. It's brilliant.
And I know we haven't seen that much of the Sarah Jane Adventures, but I trust Callum on most things. He says he doesn't think there is a bad episode of that show.
All the snippets I've seen are so much fun. It's one of the best representations of the 11th Doctor I've seen when he shows up. It's great. It's great.
Russell T Davies #1. Oh, and also another thing I think this is one of those ones where I keep referencing things I've mentioned on the channel before, but it's probably because we've covered a lot of Russell content with Jake. Something that I appreciate more than anything else is when you take something that I traditionally don't enjoy and make it enjoyable. Mm-hmm. I hate soap opera.
Yeah.
I hate soap opera, but I love the Russell T Davies era of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Because he makes that genre fun to watch.
For sure.
Because he makes it not only smart, well thought out, significant, heartfelt, but mixed in with sci-fi in a way that feels natural, and it's beautiful, and it's, yeah.
The end.
Yes. Speechless. I don't know what to say now.
There's nothing left to say.
Yes. Tell us what your ranking of the showrunners are. Tell us what you thought of our list. And, yeah, hope you all enjoyed this video.
Enjoy the rest of the Advent calendar coming your way very soon.
Today was day 9, right?
Yes.
Just double checking. I always forget these
What's coming
things.
tomorrow?
Day 9, yeah. So day 9, that is us for day 9. Hope you all enjoyed it. Tomorrow will be day 10, which will be a very special video of sorts. One that you may not have seen coming. One with a particular face you may not have seen before, depending on whether or not you've been on Twitter. But one voice you may have heard. I'll let you all figure out what that is in the meantime. Oh. In the meantime, we will see you all tomorrow for day 10.